The Mariners added a bunch of relievers during the offseason, but which ones stand out the most to us and who has the best shot of making an impact on the club in 2025? We'll discuss that and more coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. This is Titan Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Pitchers and catchers have officially reported today for the Mariners. We have the spring training TV schedule, so we'll go over that. We'll also dive a bit into the group of relief arms the Mariners compiled over the course of the offseason. We'll also talk about some of the players that we're interested in seeing this spring. No title sponsor today, but as always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out is click the link in the description of this episode. So again, pitchers and catchers have reported this uncharacteristically quiet offseason, very disappointing offseason. Slog of an offseason to cover is pretty much over. Baseball activities have begun. How you feeling, Colby?
Yeah.
You excited to talk about spring training TV schedules and relievers today?
Yeah. Because I'm legally obligated to say yes.
Yeah. So, yesterday, the Mariners dropped their spring training TV schedule. We've been waiting to see what this was going to look like. So, the Mariners, first and foremost here, say on this page, Mariners fans can watch more spring training games than ever before, which is not true because there's 15 games on here and they had 16 in 2015, as Mariner Muse discovered on Twitter. So that's all right. Sure. Whatever. So there's 8 webcasts. These are the games that you can watch on mariners.com.
One camera.
There'll be a, well, at least that's what it was last year. We'll see if they've made some upgrades to it. I did talk to Kevin Martinez when they were doing the ones last year, and he said that they were going to try and make some upgrades to it. So we'll see.
Question.
So yeah,
are they going to try to make upgrades to it like they tried to upgrade their roster?
Good one.
Because if so, I guess we're going to have to tie some cans to a piece of string and try to listen to the broadcast down in Arizona.
Yeah, what's the Donovan Solano equivalent of a production upgrade? Like a GoPro down the third baseline?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Mariners webcasts, there's 8 of them. First one is for the first game on February 21st against the Padres. Then you'll get to see him again on there on February 23rd against the Diamondbacks, February 26th against the A's, February 27th against the Giants, February 28th against the Padres, March 1st against the White Sox, March 3rd against the Guardians, and then March 15th against the Padres. The Root Sports broadcasts began on March 6th, and you're going to get back-to-back games, March 6th and March 7th on Root Sports. Those games against the Diamondbacks and Dodgers. March 9th, which is a Sunday against the Rockies, March 13th against the Diamondbacks, March 14th against the Guardians, and another game right after on March 14th against the Guardians. But this is the spring breakout game. It's the Mariners all-star prospects against the Guardians all-star prospects. And then finally, the last Root Sports broadcast will happen on March 23rd against the Brewers. And of course, there will be, if you have MLB TV, there will be other Mariners games, I'm sure, that will be broadcast by other teams. You're going to get 15 games, though, directly from the Mariners this spring. So what is that, half?
Thankfully, they decided to take that nice long break right in the week of spring training when the starters play like normal games. You won't have to watch Randy Arozarena get 4 at-bats in the game until opening day. I was a little worried we might be seeing too much Julio, but don't worry. They took care of that by having that week-long gap where, the starters go 5 innings and all that, like in the hitters get 3 or 4 at bats in the game. But I was a little worried we'd see too much Julio and not enough, Luis Suizbel. So thankfully the Mariners have us covered there. So
yeah. The gap that you're talking about is, March 15th, which is the last webcast. The next time you can watch the Mariners via the Mariners is March 23rd against the Brewers. So 8 days.
Whew.
Yeah.
I was worried we might get a little too much baseball there. I know it's tough because you got to have the Graham Bessinger interviewing Charles Barkley thing play.
Yeah. As someone that doesn't live in Washington, what do they show on Root Sports now that they don't have the Blazers or the Kraken?
That a lot of like Mariner Monday rewinds where they're just showing you all the games.
Yeah.
I think the backpacking through Europe show is still a thing.
Sure.
So, it's very hard for them to broadcast more Mariner games, even though they own the station and the equipment and, literally they're down there anyways. It's just really difficult. Cause you don't want to break away from the international 8-ball, 9-ball, whatever, pool, that billiards tournament they're showing on there. So
there you go. Yeah. So I'll take a look. I do this every year. I put together a spreadsheet of which games are on Root, which games are on webcast, and which games are on like national TV or on MLB TV. So I'll go through the schedules for every team that the Mariners are playing this spring and put together a spreadsheet with everything there. And I'll probably post a link either tomorrow or on Friday's show in the description.
Yeah. For the record, just because there's more spring training games this year than last year doesn't mean the Mariners did you guys a favor or anything like that, because there's literally zero reason for them not to put every game on TV. Literally zero.
And again, like this whole like Mariners fans can watch more spring training games than ever before. It's not true.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they just like, they
forgot.
We missed one. Like, okay,
yeah, sure.
Fine. Yeah. So I'm not going to like call them out for lying per se.
It's just silly.
Inaccurate information.
Yeah, it's just silly.
Like you're patting yourself on the back, like more access than ever. And it's like, that's not true.
Yeah.
Especially since 8 of the 15 are just on webcast. They're not even on Root Sports.
It's just like, come on.
Yeah. Like, can we not?
Which, by the way, that's the point that I'm at with everything this team does at this point. I'm just like, really?
It's like, why? What are you doing?
Yeah. Anyway. All right. So
good news, I guess, is we're watching baseball in 10 days.
Yeah. Like at the very least, we have access to the first game of the year. Cool.
Sure. Cool. Can't wait to watch on 480p.
480p, so I can watch Spencer Packard. Jake Slaughter.
Mm-hmm. I just don't understand, why can't every game at least be webcasted? Because that's literally a camera, so yeah, we'll see. I mean, like I said, I'm certainly, I'll check it out.
How many Peoria games are not being webcasted or broadcasted by Root Sports? That's it. I'll have to look into that later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I'll check it out. I'm certainly hoping, because I did watch them last year, the 2 they tried, and it was better than nothing. Certainly, I'll give them that. But
it was fine. It was fine.
Yeah, no, it was fine. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how it all shakes out there. But yeah, I mean, like more than last year, cool, I guess, but like still not anywhere near enough. Come on. Yeah. By the way, how many of these games are going to be simulcast, do you think? Where they're like not even going to use their own broadcast equipment?
I mean, probably the ones that are on the road. So the Guardians and the Diamondbacks ones.
Probably. All right. Well, I mean, we'll see. Anyways, baseball back on
baseball.
TV, kind of
back on your screen of some kind.
Sure.
I mean, you can hook up your laptop to a TV and watch the webcast on your TV.
You can do that now?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Welcome to 2025, Colby. All right.
Is that like some kind of HDMI cable?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have one of those.
I'll buy you one. It's okay. I'll buy you
I'm
one.
Good.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, hey, the Mariners put together another interesting group of relief arms via some minor trades. the waiver wire, and minor league signings. We'll go over some of those and talk about our favorites and who actually might have a shot at either breaking camp with the team or at least making an impact with the big league club at some point in 2025. In just a moment, but first, a reminder, this Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk or on a road trip or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So we talk about this every year. The Mariners have built a reputation for themselves for being able to pluck quality relievers out of seemingly thin air. They've done it pretty much every single season. Last year, it's guys like Colin Snyder. Previous years, it's been the Justin Topas of the world and the Paul Sewalds of the world and what have you. So who could follow in those guys' footsteps this year? Now, when you look at the Mariners bullpen right now, I'd say it's pretty much set. We'll see what happens with Troy Taylor and his lat strain. So there might be one spot up for grabs. But other than that, I think Andres Munoz, Gregory Santos, Colin Snyder, Trent Thornton, Edward Bizardo, Taylor Saucedo, and Gabe Spire, those guys are pretty much locked in to making the bullpen, barring injury, of course.
Right.
So opportunities to break camp with the team are very limited, especially, again, if Taylor's able to make it back before opening day from his lat strain, then those are your 8 guys, most likely. But if not, might be some interesting competition here in camp. One of the very few roster battles for the Mariners in camp right now. So let's go over some of these names. Blas Castano was the first name that I see here. He was surprisingly added to the 40-man roster to protect him from the Rule 5 draft this offseason. They probably see him more as like part of the emergency starting pitching depth, but maybe he factors in as a reliever. Maybe there's something that they see there. I'm not aware of anything that they think that they could tap into there, but maybe. Hagen Danner, someone that they claimed off of waivers from Toronto. Interesting slider there. Will Klein, they acquired in a very small trade with A's. He was involved in the Lucas Urseg deal with the Royals. Pitched in the 2023 Futures game in Seattle. Jackson Kowar probably going to get put on the 60-day IL, right? I don't think we've heard anything about him being ready to go just yet. But seems like they like him. They've had opportunities to DFA him, but they haven't yet. Maybe he ends up getting DFA next week after they claim someone. Who knows? But so far he's survived. Casey Legamina, they acquired him. That was a small trade with the Rays, right? Or Reds, rather.
The Reds.
Yeah. And then Carlos Vargas is he's already been here, but that's another guy to just mention on the 40-man roster, along with Cody Bolton, who was also here last year and did get some small run with the big league club. After that, though, you look at the non-roster invitees. There's a couple of names that they're weird. Like one of them is like, that guy still pitches. And that's Neftali Feliz. Like he's still active and he's in Mariners camp. Shintaro Fujinami is another guy that a couple of teams have dreamed on, but they just haven't been able to get him to throw enough strikes. Maybe the Mariners are able to crack the code on him. And like we said back when they signed Fujinami, like, if any team is going to crack the code on him, it's probably the Mariners. And if they're not able to, then yeah, that's probably a wrap for him. Jesse Hahn, that's another guy that's like, he's still pitching. Yeah, he's a Mariners camp as well as Casey Lawrence, who's been with this organization for what feels like forever. Drew Pomeranz is in Mariners camp. He hasn't pitched in the big league since 2021. But obviously, Pomeranz, former All-Star, at one point was one of the best left-handed relievers in the entire game. And then you get into some interesting names like Donis Medina and Doris Valdez. Who stands out to you the most?
Obviously, the Feliz and Pomerantz duo is probably the most interesting because they were at one point like elite relievers. It's just, toddlers are alive today who never saw these guys be pitching the big leagues. So, it's a little tough to trust either one of them. Pomerantz, certainly the lefty, is probably going to have an advantage over Feliz. But yeah, those two guys are pretty interesting just because of kind of the novelty of it. Will Klein is a pretty interesting guy. He's was a pretty highly rated relief prospect, which means he wasn't all that highly rated. But for a reliever, if you're inside a team's top 20, that's pretty interesting. And he throws pretty hard, pretty good slider. So, he's got a shot. Again, it's just about can he throw strikes? And it's the same thing with Fujinami, who probably has the best raw stuff of anybody in the pile, but also least likely to throw strikes with any consistency whatsoever.
Yeah.
And while the Mariners are willing to take some chances on guys in their pen who might not throw a lot of strikes, they're not going to do it for a guy who's averaging 7 walks per 9 innings pitched. I mean, 4.5 is probably like the max that they're willing to take a shot on. So Fujinami is one of those guys. I think Will Klein is probably the guy of the 40-man, the guys who are actually on the 40-man. He's probably the one I'm most interested to see. And I think he's the one that probably has the highest upside. But I think Koar is probably that guy, but Koar is probably going to start the year on the 60. We'll see if he pitches this year at all. They're less bullish on him than even Matt Brash, even though they both had the surgery right around the same time. So, I think Klein is probably the most interesting one. And then of the non-40-man guys that they brought in this winter, I would say probably Pomerantz or Fujinami is the most interesting out of that group.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we always say, just choose your racer, and then we'll see which one comes out at the end of the year and actually has an impact on this team, because it's probably one of these guys who's going to pop and really help out this bullpen.
Yeah. Fujinami, if they can figure him out, has the potential to be really exciting. It's loud stuff. And if you can hone that, get him to throw more strikes, I mean, that's a legitimate, the potential there is high leverage reliever, Fujinami. Yeah. But the path is so murky for him to actually get there. Pomeranz is just, that's just a fun name to hear. I don't know what he looks like at this point. I'd be fairly surprised if he factored in to the equation. Even though that the Mariners don't have a ton of left-handed competition really in their bullpen right now. It's Saucedo, it's Spire, eventually Brandon Garcia. I don't think it's going to be Garcia right away. I think he's going to start the year in the minors, and probably going to be starting the year as a starter as well. But
Adam Jew did single him out in his article this morning. In terms of just names to watch in the bullpen. In terms of kind of a deeper, a deep sleeper on the list here, Hunter Cranton is still my favorite.
Yeah.
Up to 100, 101 with a pretty good slider, throws enough strikes right now. I would be, barring, health, of course, I would be pretty shocked if we didn't see Cranton pitch for the Mariners at some point this year. There's really, there's no illusion that he is a starter. He's probably going to start the year in Arkansas would be my guess. But I think he has a small shot to just, if Taylor's out and, maybe another arm goes down, which isn't unusual in spring, they might just ride the upside of a guy like Cranton. Because again, it's very good, very classic reliever stuff, and he throws enough strikes right now. And obviously, if he refines that even more, that would obviously help his cause. But I think Hunter Cranton is a kind of a deep sleeper to watch in this bullpen mix. And while I don't think there's much of a shot he breaks camp with the big club, I wouldn't be totally shocked if he did manage to do that. And I would expect him. He's going to be the first guy up from this last year's draft class, and it wouldn't shock me at all if it was very early in 2025.
You a little surprised that Brock Moore didn't get a non-roster invite?
Kinda. I wonder if they still think maybe there's a shot he can start.
Yeah.
Because the delivery is a little bit easier to dream on with Moore. He's a little bit better of an athlete. So I wonder maybe they just want to start him, in Modesto as a starter and kind of see how that goes. But yeah, he's a guy who they could transition to the bullpen in June, and he could legitimately be up, 3 weeks later, pitching out of the Mariners bullpen. The stuff is insane for Moore. So yeah, a little surprised, but I have to imagine that they want to give him a shot to start, which kind of feels like a waste of time to me, but also it doesn't take long to transition from the rotation to the bullpen. It really doesn't. So why not take a shot?
You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So yesterday, we went over. Thank you. We went over the biggest storylines for the Mariners in spring training, and some of what we talked about yesterday. Pretty much, yeah. So some of what we talked about yesterday pretty much goes hand in hand with what we're about to talk about. But let's go over some guys that we're going to be specifically watching this spring. I'll give you a name that we didn't talk about yesterday. Brian Wu. Has he actually done anything, made any tweaks with his secondaries? Has he added a pitch? We haven't really heard anything about Wu this offseason. So I'm curious to see if it's pretty much the same. It's going to be the same approach from him. He's going to attack guys with both of the fastballs, and, we'll see when his secondaries pop up. There were a couple of starts over the course of 2024 where he did go more heavy on the secondaries. But interested to see if he's made any progression in that regard. JP Crawford, someone that I mentioned yesterday, to see if maybe he's made any ideal tweaks with his swing, with his setup after the down year last year. Maybe he's gone back to drive line, worked on some things. We'll see. And then obviously Jorge Polanco, right, for obvious reasons.
Obviously, the second base situation is kind of the biggest question mark right now. So, while we talk about Cole Young, and we'll probably talk about him a lot, I do think Ryan Bliss is in an important spring right now if he wants to push for any kind of regular playing time. And by the way, he's not even guaranteed to make the opening day roster. He could go from being the primary second baseman to being in AAA, because can he play shortstop? Probably enough, but the Mariners, if Dylan Moore is the primary second baseman, they need somebody on the bench who can play a decent shortstop. And Bliss is very limited in that role because of his arm. So he could lose that spot to Leo Rivas, which, but possible it could happen. So, I think Ryan Bliss is a guy who needs to have a pretty good spring. So obviously the second baseman, all of them, Moore, Bliss, Young, you're watching, but Bliss kind of sort of I don't want to say he's the odd man out, but he's kind of the overlooked one right now, just because Moore is the perceived starter and Young is the up and comer who's trying to, force his way onto the roster, and kind of sandwiched between those two guys is Ryan Bliss, who did some, nice things for Seattle last year, but also not so nice things. And there were some struggles in Tacoma. So it'll be interesting to see him. Dom Canzone is kind of an interesting one. Now, Canzone's a guy who probably going to dominate Arizona just in terms of the numbers. He's probably going to, because he's going to hit the ball hard, which means he's going to hit a lot of home runs. He's probably going to get tons of at-bats. And mostly in Arizona, people are just throwing fastballs, which we know Canzone can handle. So Canzone's probably a guy who's going to do well statistically, but he's kind of fighting for his, relevancy as a Major League Baseball player this spring, and maybe he can perform well enough that the Mariners look at Mitch Haniger and finally go like, we just don't have a choice. We can't even pretend to justify this. So kind of somebody to take over that true fourth outfield spot, which because you have Robles, that fourth outfielder doesn't necessarily need to play center field or be able to play center field. Yeah. You're still covered there if something happens. So yeah, that fourth outfield spot could be another one in Canzone. If it's not Haniger, Canzone would be the favorite based on who's on the roster right now. So,
by the way, Canzone and Bliss might be vying for the same spot on the roster, not the same role, but the same spot on the roster.
26th spot. Yeah.
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 So because again, you have Dylan Moore who can play some outfield. You have Luke Raley who can play some outfield. This bench isn't good, but it is pretty flexible. Minus Haniger, of course, right? But
it's a lot less flexible on the days where Garver, Haniger, and Solano are all sitting. So,
but that's just to say that the Mariners can do really whatever they want with the 26th roster spot,
right?
The 13th position player spot,
right? Because anything like long term, they were to be like, oh, what if JP gets hurt? It's like, okay, then you just move Dylan Moore to short, and whoever's the infielder on the bench plays second or third, and you move Polanco to second, and then you just make your roster move the next day, right? We saw this, like you can't have the catcher DH because what if the catcher gets hurt and you have to take it? We saw this last year, right? You just had to give one at bat to Luis Castillo, and everything else played out fine. It's one of those things where like it's a little bit overblown, but it is still something. You don't want to be in a position, right, where it's like, cool, Jorge Polanco's playing shortstop now because our build was so terrible that he's actually the best option we have. It's pretty much the guys you'd expect. Obviously, it's Polanco too because you want to see how healthy he is. But yeah, I mean, what are you really going to learn about like Victor Robles in the month of March? Not much, to be honest.
No.
It's guys who are kind of fighting for their spots, not only in Seattle, but possibly on other 26 man around the league here. And Canzone and Bliss, I think, can probably help themselves the most. So those are the guys that I'm kind of watching. And then obviously the arms in the bullpen pile. Which one of those is going to pop?
Yeah. And then obviously, Colt Emerson, Michael Arroyo, Las Montes, those guys, but that's not for any specific reason other than just cool to watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Harry Ford also in that mix.
Yeah. All right. So that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez. Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG. Colby at MLB Colby. The show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.